So for everyone online, that was a question about e-scooters and their use in the borough and what will happen over the next 5 years. So,
perfect question. I've got to separate two hats I hold. I hold a transport hat pan-London for London Council, so I'm the chair of Transport Environment Committee, and in that role I lead the e-scooter pilot for the 10 boroughs that are signed up to the e-scooter pilot. I've taken part in the testing of those. I find all EV vehicles, power-assisted vehicles, slightly odd to use compared to a pedocycle. So I probably need more training on e-scooters if I'm to fully embrace them. We took a decision early on that given all of the other active travel investments we were able to make, we didn't have the resources to take part in the trial properly. Some of that was the experience with the AFO. We wanted to get the doctor's bike scheme borough-wide. There was a bit of a debate about could you do it in Shoreditch and kind of tap into it, and we decided at that point not to take part in the trial as a borough. I think what we're learning from the trial is a well-regulated e-scooter system can work. What we have, every person in Hackney that's on an e-scooter, I'm afraid, is doing so illegally. There is no legal way to use an e-scooter in the borough. And so we have to separate out illegal use and regulated use. The benefits of regulated use is vehicle identification, helmets, speed limiters in areas like the Narrowway if we choose to go down that route, geofencing. You have to have a driving licence. Now I know that that's probably a barrier to some of the people that would want to use an e-scooter, and that might be need to look at. But you know, putting a noise is something that I know disability groups have talked about because you can't hear them coming. So I think wherever the government acts and brings forward a Transport Act, and how Hackney approaches that, we'd want to do it in a way that regulates it, makes sure it protects all road users. I think, though, it is probably the direction of travel of the future. If there's a second wave of the pilots, I'd be interested in it. A lot of disabled people also tell me that e-scooters give them a huge amount of freedom because they can't cycle, they don't want to drive, and it gives that personal sense of freedom. And I know people on this estate feel that as well. So I'm committed to exploring it in more detail, but I just wanted to give a bit of history of why we're not in the pilot. It was a purely a capacity issue, and also some of the experience of finding stuff abandoned with the AFO scheme.
Thanks. It was really interesting to hear about the history, and I know that from cities like Bristol, you know, this has really taken off as a mode of transport, and it's really part of their kind of identity around the way they travel around the city. So yeah, just picking up on some of the things that Phil said, I think it's all about the regulation and making sure it's safe, because I know that we've currently got kind of conflict for space, and I know that, you know, in areas where it is happening, we need to make sure that, you know, it's not unsafe on pavements or conflicting with, you know, cycle lanes and those kind of things. So yeah, committed to look at it. I think it is going to be part of the future and learn from places in the pilot where it's working.
So I think that e-scooters could well be the future for people who can't use a bike, and I accept that. I think it's good, but I think, as Phil said, we need to look at the legal side of things. Now, I'm not paid by Uber, but I know that, and I know that I've brought them up quite a lot, that the Lime scooters, which you get in central London, are great for people who want to use them. Now, I've never used an e-scooter. I'm a bit scared of them, to be honest. But I would use an electric bike. So for those who want to use e-scooters, then that's great. I think that this also goes back into the issue about sort of maintained cycle lanes. We don't always have properly maintained cycle lanes here in Hackney, and actually when you're cycling, a pothole is a lot more dangerous than if you're in a car, and even more so if you're on an electric scooter, just based on sort of wheel size and suspension and things like that. So I think ensuring that any infrastructure we have, either for cycles or for e-scooters, when they become legal, when the trials start again, if they do, it's really important that it's well maintained to ensure the safety of those users. So, thank you.
I think any new green form of transport is really exciting and worth exploring, and may well be the future, as we've said. Who knows what the future of transport will be? But it's important to do it safely. We're a small borough in terms of we're very densely populated. Our roads are obviously very busy. We haven't perhaps got as many cycle pathways as we would like. So absolutely in favour of it, but proceed with caution, proper pilots, and then analyse the results of them.
Okay, I'm going to go to an online question, if that's all right. We've got two online. So this is from Tom, who says, how will you make it easier for residents who want to work together to repurpose their streets away from car parking in order to create alternative uses of public space? The process is not currently simple and is an obstacle to community-led innovation instead of an enabler. So I think that's based around parklets. Thank you. That's from Tom.
Who would like to go first? Oliver?
Right. So I don't have any personal experience with this. I don't live on a street in that way. I live in a council estate, so we don't have access to sort of on-street parking anyway. But what I would say is that it's important that communities have the choice in what they do with their streets, and it's important that we allow communities to decide amongst themselves what happens with the streets. So whether that is through parklets or whether that is through repurposing car parking spaces into becoming bike hangars, which I know has happened in Hoxton West, just a few yards from where I live, but isn't actually you can't use it as a resident of my building for some reason. So I think that actually looking at that again and enabling communities, it all goes back to giving power back to communities to decide, which is part of my campaign, and I know it's part of Helen's as well. But yeah, exactly. Community-led is really important.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I talked at the beginning about how local people know what's best for their communities, and I think it's really exciting that people want to reimagine their neighbourhoods, and I would do everything I could to help that, put that into action, and that would be engaging with community groups, with perhaps mini citizens' assemblies, really listening to what people want for their communities, and helping fight for them to put that in place.
Thank you. This is a great question, as I've got the absolute luxury of living on a closed roads estate, and I know what that does for kind of community cohesion, what that does for families and children, and it just, yeah, we've got the luxury of being able to kind of just chat to our neighbours in the street, and it just is we've got a wonderful identity as an estate because of it. So I'd love to support more streets and roads and neighbourhoods to have that, and I think that's the vision with creating a low traffic borough and, you know, rolling out low traffic neighbourhoods. And I think there was a bit of a bureaucratic question in there, so I would make it as easy as possible for groups to access funding or close their street. You know, there's great groups out there kind of providing training for doing those kind of things as well, and I know from experience of being the chair of the TRA, it is, you know, I know there's lots of stuff out there, but it's just helping groups, you know, and residents find that. I'm going to take a shot at this. Might be Tom from Alvington Crescent, and we have been talking about how we support the residents in Alvington Crescent to, you know, live out the kind of dreams they've got for creating Alvington Crescent into a, you know, a more kind of play street. So yeah, really supportive of working with residents and yeah, creating the spaces for people.